Metroid 2 Samus Returns is a perfectly serviceable 2D Metroidvania with fast responsive movement, cool weapons, and uninterrupted exploration. But it's not much more than that. Let me remind you that the last 2D Metroid game was Zero Mission from 2004. Since then, these kind of games have been plentiful and come a long way, and yes, your eyes do not deceive you, Cave Story was released after the last 2D Metroid game before this. It's a goddamn madhouse. So while Samus Returns gets the job done, it isn't legendary. And if there's one thing Metroid should be, it's that big boy L word. In fact, in a lot of ways, Metroid Samus Returns feels a little bit cheapo, a little bit stagnant compared to the games in the genre that have come before it, even when up against the Nokia phone looking ass game it's a remake of. It's been months since the game came out, so hopefully we can get down and dirty into a bit of critiquing without hype or anything clouding our judgment. So let's get into it. Something I felt Samus Returns lacked, in contrast to most other Metroid games, was really any sense of dread or atmospheric tension. You know what I mean, right? In certain rooms in other Metroid games, there would just be this eerie sense that you were in a bad or spooky place, something sending chills down your spine. I never got that feeling at all in Samus Returns. Not many rooms really let things breathe and allow the player to reflect all that much on where they are and what they're doing. Everything in this game is so bright, the colors are so in your face and vibrant, even the elevators once used in Metroid as dark, ominous passageways, giving you tingles as you move from area to area. And now glowing super bright at you. It lacks the darker, edgier mood of past Metroid games, and as a remake of Metroid 2, one of the darkest, edgiest Metroid titles, I feel like that's a bit of a blunder. One of the non-hack critics who talked about Samus Returns was Game Maker's Toolkit, who was also nice enough to give me all his footage for this video. I don't have a 3DS capture card, so thanks Mark. He pointed out that while the original game made its caverns get more and more desolate and empty as you slowly went down deeper underground, forcing you into a dark, bleak, lonely abyss, Samus Returns does the opposite by making the last few levels just as bombastic and action-packed as the early segments, more so even. If there's one thing I'd say Metroid has always done pretty well, and you hear everyone say this, is that you truly feel isolated in these games. And never was this more the case than in Metroid 2, where the passages were claustrophobic, everything was dark and you couldn't see what was in front of you, and the end of the game was this empty, lifeless pit devoid of activity except for a few exceptionally crazy monsters. I don't think any other Metroid games have ever gone this far in making you feel like you're going into a true alien abysm, and it works for the more linear design of Metroid 2. It's a constant downward trajectory. You get that vibe you're going where nobody should go. And you may be thinking, hey, maybe they didn't do that on purpose, maybe that was just the constraints of the Game Boy forcing them to make smaller levels and put less on the screen. And maybe you're right, but that doesn't change the fact that whether on purpose or by accident, that's what Metroid 2 was and is. That's the type of experience it provided. Doesn't matter if it was completely by chance, the remake fails to replicate it. The game includes all these teleporters that take you all over the place, and they're there to speed things up and let you get around quicker, but it removes that layer of vicious claustrophobia the original provided, by being a one-way descent with no return. Here you can go back and forth and everywhere. Samus Returns is a bright, bloomy, safe game. It's Metroidvania, you're underground, it's alien, but it's all very warm and inviting. Don't want to put too many people off with a spooky Metroid. It has a linear structure, but you can zip-zap all over the place now. You get a button that shows you where all the secrets are hidden around you. They put loads of extra checkpoints in the game, and we'll get to that soon enough. It's a game that doesn't take that many chances, doesn't push any boundaries or get experimental with the formula with some crazy new setup or world structure. And maybe now is the time to play it safe, maybe now's not the time to do something like the Dark World or hunters that are competing with you or a spooky nemesis hunting you down. But playing it this safe with Samus Returns kind of places Metroid down at the bottom of the pile when it comes to current Metroidvanias, in the banal standard corner. And as we've established, Metroid should be legendary. Unfortunately, while failing to capture the dark, moody vibe of the original game, Samus Returns still adopts enough traits from it to get some of the original's flaws. Metroid 2 was a game about killing a bunch of Metroids, but there was only like 5 variants, and this is the case in Samus Returns. You run around, kill the same monster again and again, and over time the next more powerful variant will show up with more and more health and more annoying patterns to follow. Hey, where you going? We're not done here yet! The boss fights in this game are not the highlight. They weren't the highlight in the original either. Here, there was maybe a chance to add more boss fights or more Metroid forms, but they don't really do that much. One of the big new bosses they have is this dull robot-looking guy whose fight is probably one of the worst in the series. When it comes to boss fights, I tend to like those that allow the flow of the fight to stay in the hands of the player. Ones where the boss doesn't go off halfway through to check he didn't leave the gas on and becomes invulnerable for ages while he maybe does a couple of attacks in the distance. I admit there's been some dodgy ones like this in the series before, but most don't keep you twiddling your thumbs literally just waiting for the boss to stop doing attacks, even if you do have to do something extra to make them vulnerable. I like bosses where your skill can dramatically affect how long it takes to beat the thing, where there's always a chance to do damage or work towards doing damage. This guy is just like, I'm gonna go over here and just do some attacks and you can dodge them and then wait for my one attack that makes me vulnerable. This is not the best, and how long it can take to redo this fight if you die is a real drag. AM2R, we gotta bring that up, the fan remake had more and better additional bosses than this. AM2R as well overall feels like it did a better job at adding context to the original game in a more natural way when implementing streamlining. Instead of teleporters all over the world, you have one area that has some kind of quick transportation system for objects that the people here might have used back in the day to send things around, but that you as Samus can exploit as a shortcut. It's a better way of making the world a tad bit more interconnected without sticking teleporters in every other floor. AM2R and the original were also happy just to contextualize new areas being open with an earthquake every time there was no Metroids left in an area. In Samus Returns, there's this big-ass Metroid DNA machine that opens new areas if you kill Metroids and then register them. I thought in concept, in the lore, the Metroids were supposed to be protectors of this planet. Don't know why killing the would-be local pest control gives you access to more of the world. These must have been last-minute additions made by the inhabitants. AM2R I also think made the right choice in terms of the look of the game. The 3D visuals in Samus Returns can't help but frame the game's world in a weird, simplistic way. If you use 3D models on low-end hardware like a 3DS, they can only look so detailed, but if you use pixel art, then you can get way crazier with what you design and put out there. In Samus Returns, you're not going to come across something as detailed looking as, say, Nightmare, all dripping and messed up. I mean, some of the more grisly aliens look fine, but I don't think they're up to par with the intricacy yet clarity their 2D counterparts can offer. Pixel art beats out simple 3D when it comes to standing the test of time and when bringing to life complex designs. Okay, so the game lacks the look and feel of the best Metroid can do. The level design and structure of the game in terms of enemy placement, all that jazz, isn't emblematic of the dark, dour mood of the original, but at least the game still plays like a hard-hitting survival Metroidvania, right? Kinda, partially. I mean, I wouldn't say the game is a pushover, I died a lot, but the element of survival that 2D Metroid usually offers pretty well, including AM2R, is gone. Because the game has invisible checkpoints before and after boss encounters that will bring you back there if you die, instead of the save points doubling as the checkpoints. This removes that feeling of having to be alert and on guard at all times. Like in older ROMs, when you knew that to back up everything you've done, you're gonna need to find a save point and therefore manage your life and ammo carefully when you're not near one. That tense sensation of hunting these monsters is reduced when you can take it so easy after and before beating them. Now, the way the damage from the enemy and the player's health is balanced at the moment, I probably wouldn't remove these checkpoints right now. It would likely make the game pretty frustrating as is. But I think making the enemies a little easier to kill while removing the checkpoints would keep the difficulty pretty much the same but return that survival facet to Metroid. That element the series can do so well. Prime 3 and Other M had checkpoints outside of save rooms, but those games were kind of going for this big epic action mood, and I'm not saying I wouldn't still try to combine checkpoints with saves in those games, but at least it made a little more sense there. The underground Abyss Descent Metroid game should not be letting you run around its cavernous tunnels taking it easy knowing you're never at risk of losing any important progress. Combat has had a few additions outside of the odd new beam gun. Aiming works a little different now. You can hold the aim button in place to look around all 360, but that means it no longer takes you straight into this useful diagonal aim right away like in other 2D Metroid games. But it's not a big deal once you get used to it. The major new 2D Metroid Combat Edition is this parry move. Much like Other M, Samus Returns weirdly has its eyes set on 3D beat-em-up hack-and-slash mechanics to up the ante on the combat front. I can't say I was all that into it. You have to stop to do this counterattack, and usually I just want to get to where I'm going. I honestly preferred the timed dodge charge beam stuff in Other M because at least that kind of kept the momentum going. You know, usually when a beat 'em up or hack and slash includes some kind of counter move that can stun the enemy, it like opens up some choices as to how you dispatch them next. Here you counter, you shoot, it's basically the same every time. I can see their thought process here. It makes sense that in a game where all the enemies are weird little bat things that just ram into you, that you should have some kind of physical counter move. But maybe it should have been just a little faster or a little less flashy, just let me run while doing it. Here's an idea. Instead of me countering an enemy and then firing a blast to kill them straight after, which is like my only option anyway, how about for the smaller enemies that die in one shot after a counter, you just let me smack them while running, and if I nail the timing, the smash alone kills them and I can keep moving without interruption. You can't tell me that's not a good idea. That wouldn't reward skilled play. So yeah, the game has a few new ideas like this to add to the series, but that doesn't mean that on the flip side there isn't an adherence to include certain callbacks that can get a bit much. Like, can someone explain to me why every single hot environment you go into turns on the Ridley area theme from Super Metroid no matter where or when? Was this necessary? You're all good listening to the stage music and then it's dun 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 dun. Stuff that I wish they did carry over from Super Metroid, and more specifically Zero Mission, is the advanced speedrunning controls. Wall jumping had gotten to the point in that game where you could bounce yourself up the same wall to get to places all cheeky. There are a lot of tricks to be done and secret passageways designed purely for sequence breaking that permitted the most skilled to beat the game in crazy fast ways. I'll admit I haven't exactly combed every inch of this game. There may be some super duper secret hidden speedrunning paths in here, but stuff like infinitely wall bouncing up the same wall is gone. The arc you get off the wall jump is much stricter. The wall jumping is even disabled altogether if you try to go up a very tight vertical passage, which is a total cheat. This was never the case in prior 2D games. Just put some weird non-wall jumpable goop on the walls or something if you don't want me going up them that way. Don't break your own rules. On the bright side, you still can exploit morph ball bomb jumping to go up pretty far, so I guess there are some tricks to be looked into there, but it's a shame Samus Returns has taken a step back from the absolutely insane versatility of the Zero Mission controls, which were definitely an incentive to replay that game over and over for me. Okay, it's time to talk about the ending, the much discussed, added, expanded conclusion put in this remake game. So in the original title, after spending your whole time going deeper and deeper into this dark nest to kill a bunch of alien abominations, the game concludes with you discovering the final Metroid, who actually takes a liking to you. You both emerge from the caverns together as a soothing, uplifting theme punctuates the hours of blasting downstairs. The second game in the series, and Return of Samus was already subverting the ending of the previous title, where after beating the final boss you have to race out of the place before a countdown explosion. You might have expected that here, but instead, whoa, your expectations are defied. In Samus Returns, you meet up with the baby Metroid, but instead of that soothing exit theme, you get a sort of ominous re-rendition of it. And then boom, Ridley, a boss from the other games, shows up and you fight him. It's a fine boss fight, I guess, pretty exciting, fast-paced. I just can't help but shake the feeling that the dev team looked at the ending for the original and thought that nice little addendum exit was too boring to do nowadays. What, are you telling me you just walk out and there's no problem? Let's jazz the old game up, add some explosions. The ending to Metroid 2 doesn't just subvert Metroid 1, it remains a subversive moment against the entire rest of the series. Pretty much every other Metroid game ends in some kind of bombastic, explosive, let's get out of here monster fight. This attempt here in Samus Returns to surprise players with a different take I think ultimately falls flat because it was the lack of some kind of heart-pumping escape that made the ending of Return of Samus surprising to begin with. And it's Ridley showing up again. It just feels a bit tacky, man. The only 2D Metroid game not to feature him, and now they've managed to put him in that one too. Ridley doesn't need to be in every game. Hell, he isn't in my favorite, and that's fine. His constant appearances are already a bit of a joke, so having him limp over here from Prime 3 or Metroid 1, depending on how Sakamoto and the gang feel about the timeline at the moment, is just a tad silly. It's like he wakes up from the last battle and is like, oh shit, where are the Metroids? And someone tells him Samus is killing them all on their homeworld, and somehow he arrives just as Samus is finishing up. Like if he had come like a couple hours earlier, he probably could have gotten a few Metroids. I don't know, guys. Feels like we're dropping our standards a little here, considering this the return of Metroid. Samus is back, Metroid is back, hey, even Ridley is back, it's the Metroid series, we're back! It's a bit awkward, you know. I got into Metroid because every game seemed to deliver some crazy new shit, and when Other M was like, here's all the old enemies again in Fire, Ice, and Plant World, I was not into that, and I can't say I'm that into this game purely from a content standpoint either. You know, with Zero Mission, which remade the first Metroid, at least the Zero Suit stuff didn't interfere with what the original ending was going for, and shit, a stealth segment at the end of Metroid, that was kinda crazy and daring. More than Ridley showing up again. Okay, that was Robo Ridley at the end of Zero Mission, not actually Ridley. You're seeing now why this move is a little played out. Zero Mission, aside from being a better game, having more moves, more options, refining fusion down to an art before the big retro revival of the late 2000s, etc., came out when we were getting a shitload of other great Metroid stuff. Samus Returns feels a bit limp in comparison. They titled it Samus Returns not just as a reworking of the original title, but as a get hype the series is back kind of call to action. And honestly, I will always stand by the principle that you shouldn't buy something just to support a series. Buy it if it's good. Because if it isn't good, then why are we trying to support it and get more? The thing is though, Samus Returns isn't bad, and I wouldn't really find anything wrong with anyone getting it at all. I look at what I've written here and I realize it's all pretty negative, because I struggle to really say anything of value about the stuff the game does right. Collecting items, getting to new areas, it's all rewarding and gives you a fuzzy feeling, but it's the basics. And so much more has been done with the genre by the most memey Super Metroid knockoffs. Hell, the concept of the tightly interconnected exploratory Metroidvania world has been pushed into interesting territory even by games like Dark Souls. And we've had a whole trilogy of that between this and the last mainline Metroid. Don't worry, I want to slap me for comparing something to Dark Souls 2, it's okay, you don't have to. I mean, Samus Returns is so late to the party, it's easy to overlook some of the basic additions it does add to the series. Like, can you believe in the 13 plus years the DS family of consoles has existed, this is the first 2D Metroid game to have a map displayed on another screen at all times for convenience? Just think about that one. And I think I would be remiss not to mention 2017's amazing Metroidvania Hollow Knight, with which in the first 20 minutes, I felt a greater sense of eerie melancholy, claustrophobic mood and wonder for the unknown than I did in the entirety of Samus Returns. Cryptic messages and locations in Hollow Knight gave the game a whole extra layer of comfy mystery that the exploratory pioneer Metroid didn't come close to here. Instead, bright colors, explosive action is what I got, and perhaps that's where the problem with this game lies. In the fact that Nintendo wants Samus Returns to be this triumphant, vibrant revival of the series, despite it being a remake of the most subdued, dark and quiet title of the franchise. Can those two visions really coexist? There you go, there's a good thesis to wrap this video up in. Maybe I'll title this video The Dilemma of Samus Returns to get some real clicks. No, okay, but anyway. Despite all my complaining, I was having a fine time, and I'm pretty sure, that's because, hey, I'm playing as Samus and I'm exploring again, that's a nice feeling. Last time we tried doing that, it was kind of like, whoa, what the hell's going on? So I can see why just this rehash might get some people excited. But now that we've returned, they gotta up their game going forward. I'll let this one slide, but Metroid has to do more than just be Metroid to come back and stick around again. Okay, so we're not gonna do like a jokey post-end screen like clip today, because I just kind of want to show the other videos I have on the channel, and you can't do that unless it's 20 seconds before the end of the video. Big thanks to all the top patrons you're seeing right now. If you want to support the show, hit up patreon.com/thegamingbritShow, and yeah, peace out.